Hold on to your butts, we might have a war with Iran. I know some people were holding out hope that the guy who called himself the most militaristic person in the world would not launch us into more regime change wars, but if he gets his way, if John Bolton gets his way, we could soon be at war with Iran. At a meeting of President Trump's top national security aides last Thursday, acting Defense Secretary Pat Shanahan presented an updated military plan that envisions sending as many as 120,000 troops to the Middle East should Iran attack American forces or accelerate work on nuclear weapons. Both of those conditions, by the way, for sending an absolutely massive number of troops are really interesting when you think about them. In the first part, you have, should Iran attack American forces? Now, there are unambiguous ways that Iran could attack nuclear forces. There are also ways that we could imagine, you and I, that could theoretically be spun into an attack on American forces that would allow us to engage in an absolutely massive, disastrous war with Iran. We've seen this before in America. We could be seeing it coming up soon. And also, or if it accelerates work on nuclear weapons. Well, that's interesting. We had a way to stop them from accelerating work on nuclear weapons. It was called the Iran Nuclear Accords. It was working pretty well. Trump actually pulled us out of that. Now, Iran seems like they're going to start to resume some of the work. If anybody helped to have Iran accelerate work on their nuclear weapons, he's dwelling in the White House, actually. I would lay the onus on him in this particular case. Now, just to put it in a little bit of historical perspective, the theme of this segment is going to be historical perspective. That 120,000 troops, that's approximately the size that initially invaded Iraq, to give you an idea. And that, by the way, is not being pitched as a force to invade Iran. That's not what they're saying. What they're saying is, this is just the soldiers we need in case they attack US forces somewhere in the region. We would need far, far more to actually invade Iran. And so if that is their goal, and if they're successful in pursuing that 120,000 troops, an absolutely monstrous number that we'd be sending at incredible economic cost to the United States, that would just be an appetizer, and God only knows how big that number could get at some point. Now that, at least as of now, is perspective. It's a plan that they're talking about, but there is already action on the ground and on the water. As a precaution, the Pentagon has already moved an aircraft carrier, B-52 bombers, a Patriot missile interceptor battery, and more naval firepower to the Gulf region, which I'm sure Iran will not take as any sort of provocation. And they will simply keep on keeping on with no extra. How many times have we been through this? We send some threats, then they do something. We send some forces there while telling them that they should not accelerate any sort of their plans or move any more onto an offensive military footing. Of course, they are going to do that. We will use that to justify God only knows what. We've been down this path. We're still on this path in multiple countries in the region to this point. And Donald Trump himself has tried to get tons of credit for being the guy that has been drawing down forces in the region, even though the drawdowns, if you look closely, are almost always reversed within a few days or a week, and they're not as large as they're pitched to be. But he wants that credit, and here we have us moving in the opposite direction. Now, just to be clear, in case it wasn't clear, the revisions in that plan were ordered by hardliners led by John Bolton. That's Mr. Trump's national security advisor, a guy who has never met a country he did not want to change the regime of. And again, as I said, they're not calling for a land invasion of Iran. That's not anything that they would want. No, they're just sending 120,000 troops to scare them, I guess. And let's see, so Bolton, he has this plan, big action. What about Trump? Oh no, nothing from him. On Monday, asked if he wants regime change in Iran, he said, we'll see what happens with Iran. If they do anything, it would be a very bad mistake. What about our mistakes? What about what we're doing that hypothetically could lead to military action against Iran? That, from my point of view, is a massive mistake. He has got plausible deniability that he's not involved in it. He's just responding to what they're doing. And it's really John Bolton. He's the hardliner. If you have an issue with him, maybe someday we'll kick him out, but not Trump. He won't be tarnished as a guy that gets us involved in another decades-long war in the Middle East. And for people who care about facts, who care about any of this, who've been paying attention, his next quote, "We just don't want them to have nuclear weapons, not too much to ask." See, Iran agrees that that is not too much to ask. In fact, a couple of years ago, they agreed that is why they signed on to the Iran Nuclear Accords that everyone agreed they were abiding by. Shockingly, they were abiding by it. But they were, and it was working. It was an incredibly difficult diplomatic achievement, but we were able to get that, and we did not move into some sort of war with Iran, even though many of us were afraid for a number of years that that would be the inevitable result. If John McCain had become president, it certainly seemed like it would be, but even when he was not, there was fear that the military-industrial complex would get what they would want and we would engage with a war in Iran, and we avoided that. We did not avoid a lot of the other ones in the region, but that one, potentially the biggest, most disastrous war that we can imagine in the region, we did avoid. And then we got Trump. And then the guy who has called himself the most militaristic person in the world, who has surrounded himself with hardliners and xenophobes and radicals and neocons and all of that. What do you know? We might be getting that war at long last. Now, I want to just add a little bit more on top of this, because when you are following the news and you're gonna hear about things happening in the region, you're gonna see the quotes, Iran's, their leaders, they're saying, we're prepared for everything, the stuff that people always say when they're about to go to war or when they want to avoid it. It's hard to say exactly. You're gonna see it from the point of view of America, but more specifically from the point of view of the powers that be that are interested in this conflict, and certainly the economic powers in the military-industrial complex that are gonna make a ton of money if we do go to war. And so everything that happens in the region will be spun from that point of view. But at least just briefly, I wanna put you in the point of view of a person in Iran, whether in the government or a regular person, because you understand from our point of view, we have pitched everything that they do as a violent provocation. We assume that everything they do is untrustworthy and that they are going to tend towards terrorism and violence in all cases. In many cases that might be true, but that is the approach that we have for virtually everything that they do. Now imagine if you were growing up in Iran and you have studied the history of the US's interaction with Iran. Let's go over just a few of the highlights that might make it a little bit more difficult to actually take anything the US says at face value. Back in 1953, the CIA was involved in a coup against the democratically elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh. We took it out. They have devolved into theocracy as a result of our involvement in their democratic processes. When Iraq invaded Iran, a war which killed hundreds of thousands of people in Iran, we enthusiastically supported Saddam Hussein, which was a great call in a number of different ways, and probably not something that after just a couple of decades the people of Iran are going to forget. By the way, we also shot down Iran Air 655, killing all 290 passengers and crew on there. It was a mistake, we said, but that didn't bring them back. That was a big one. Now imagine if Iran had shot down a JetBlue flight killing hundreds of people. Would we forget that so soon? I don't think so. And then, just a couple of decades later, we tell them we want an accord with you on stopping the future of your nuclear program. And I know that you've got a half-century plus of reasons not to trust us at all, but just trust us here. And we engage in that process, we get the accord, and then a couple of years go by and we violate that accord. We pull out of it, violating our end of that bargain that they had agreed to. Shockingly, again, that they had agreed to it, but they did, and we pulled out of it. And now, what are our demands? I mean, we say we don't want them to have nuclear weapons, but we're certainly not acting like it in the way that we engage with them diplomatically. From my point of view, there should be a couple of very easy asks. First of all, no war with Iran. I think that literally everyone, regardless of where you reside in the political spectrum, should be able to agree on that. It would be a disaster that would kill at the very least hundreds of thousands of people, if not far more. Iran is not Iraq when we invaded it. As a far more capable military force, that would be an absolute disaster. And Iraq, of course, was by itself. 2, get rid of John Bolton. He should have no role whatsoever in government. He shouldn't even be appearing on a Bill Maher panel, let alone actually pulling strings at the Pentagon and putting us on the war footing that we're on with Iran right now. And 3, re-implementation of the Iran nuclear accords. Look, if it's necessary to get everyone to sign on, Republicans who are completely disingenuous in the way that they have portrayed the past nuclear accords, then have more rigorous and more constant on-site examinations if that's necessary. It's possible, maybe, if we play our cards right and if we move fast, that we could actually get Iran to sign back onto that. I have my doubts, but it's certainly worth the try if it could lead to hundreds of thousands of people not dying needlessly in a war that so many people in US government seem to be pushing for right now. This is a little bit of depressing news, I apologize. But we could be entering into something that could again lead us to stay for multiple decades in the Middle East when we have an opportunity to actually pull our forces out, to not needlessly be involved in the internal workings of all of those countries. They want to double dip us in there. Thank you very much for watching this clip from the Damage Report. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell on YouTube to get notifications of our new videos. And of course, you can catch the full damage report live every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific on TYT Network on YouTube TV.